Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting, number 186, taking place on April 14th, 1700 UTC. Welcome, everyone. As usual, we've got an agenda to get through. We're going to have some updates about governance and the forum. We've got some initiative updates, and then we've got a discussion later, I believe, about curve pools and Dai Marketshare Liquidity. So yeah, everyone just sort of keeping where we're recording this call. So we'd love to hear from you, but please try not to speak over each other. You can use the hand raise functionality if you wish, or just jump in if there's a lull. So with that, we'll maybe get started. So updates on votes. We've had one weekly poll that finished this week, which passed. It was the adjusting the curve ETH staked ETH pool vault system parameters, increasing the debt ceiling to 50 million and the target available debt or gap to 10 million. That'll be in the executive this week. There's also 12 monthly ratification polls currently in progress. So please vote in those if you haven't already. I'm sure Pablo will give us or someone from the MIPs team will give us a better idea of what's going on with those just a little bit. So moving on to the executive. Last week's executive passed and executed, contained Maker Open Market Committee parameter changes, a small increase to the curve staked ETH pool debt ceiling, recognized delegate compensation for March, and funding for the ETH Amsterdam Special Purpose Fund. So tomorrow's executive proposal will include offloading the TUSD collateral as passed a few weeks ago in the polling stage. It will include those curve ETH staked ETH pool parameter changes I mentioned just a second ago. It will include funding for the Ambassador Pilot Program pilot, a little bit of funding for the Growth CU according to one of their previous budgets, and a replacement for the Gelato Keeper stream to resolve a bug in the smart contract, minor bug, so nothing to worry about. So that brings us to the end of our governance updates and brings us to MIPs. Who's up for MIPs this week? I should know, but I don't. Pablo. Can't hear you, Pablo. You muted locally.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're coming through. Yes, correctly, but you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the volume goes. Okay, so Pablo here with the MIPs update. I hope you guys can hear me now.
Yeah, I think.
Can you hear?
I think you're okay, Pablo. Go for it. That's what we are.
Okay, so next slide, please. We have a couple of weekly cycle sub-proposals. The signal request to promote MIP 4C3 SP3 to an on-chain short ratification poll passed. This poll will be going up on Monday 18 and run for 3 days. As you know, this proposal amends MIP 64 to give Immunify Security more discretion to determine the bug bounty scope. There will be a second short ratification poll going up on Monday for MIP 10C9 SP30, which whitelists Oracle access to Oasis app for these oracles that you can see on your screen. Next slide, please. Let's now take a look at the ratification polls, which went up on Monday 11 and will close on Monday 25. We have two MIPs as opposed to sub-proposals. MIP 66, Pairwyse Licensure, with 100% no votes at the moment. We will be having Akiva talking a bit about this proposal later in this call. Also a bit of a mea culpa, some of the images for this proposal are broken in the MIPS portal and in the commit the poll points to. I'll be fixing the former in a couple of minutes, but cannot do much about the latter, so sorry about that. MIP 67.2, a methodology review and process for structured finance transactions with yes in the poll position. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have the mandate refresh for governance communications, which has close to 100% yes votes, while none of its budgets, either the expansion or the more modest one, are currently passing. Next slide. The Data Insights core unit also has a mandate to refresh and the budget. This budget too is a bit contentious, but both proposals are currently passing. Next slide. We have a budget for the protocol engineering core unit with a comfortable yes to no ratio. Next slide. We have a core unit onboarding proposal set for event 001 that is currently passing. This core unit aims to be in charge of handling the planification, the organization, and the execution of MakerDAO branded events. Next slide. Yes, the first poll formalizes the addition of collateral engineering services as part of the collateral onboarding workflow. It is passing with 100% yes, and so is the poll that modifies the MIP6 collateral application form. Next slide. Finally, with 100% yes votes, the proposal for the dissolution of the content production multisig is passing too. Let's move on to the proposals in RFC. Yeah. Next slide. MIP 65 could have made it into this governance cycle, but decided instead to remain in RFC, as we all know, to address the concerns brought up by the community. MIP 68 is a self-contained collateral onboarding MIP that will onboard and activate a real-world asset vault backed by the assets of a trust arranged by Monetalis. MIP 69 formalizes technical work completed to deliver fast withdrawals on layer 2. MIP 70 onboards and activates a real-world asset vault with priority for the purpose of acquiring loans from HV Bank. MIP 71 exempts MIP 70 from MIP 65 like collateral blockings. Please note that these two proposals, MIP 70 and MIP 71, will remain in RFC for the foreseeable future, as stated by the author, and that HV Bank has published a MIP 6 and is using the existing collateral onboarding process. For more information about this, please go with MIP 70. MIP 72 authorizes Success Capital as a real-world asset arranger for MakerDAO. MIP 73 is a MIP 65 inspired self-contained collateral onboarding MIP. Next slide. And finally, yes, so we have been having for some time now a budget proposal for the strategic happiness core unit. And two amendments that aim to improve the core unit framework by revising the budget process and the core unit onboarding process. And last but not least, we have the facilitator onboarding of Psychonaut for the Unified Security core units. Psychonaut is currently a deputy facilitator for this core unit. And that's pretty much it. It was a bit long, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo, no problem. The updates. All right, that brings us to Artem. He's going to give us a quick update of what's going on the forum.
Yep. Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. And just quick welcome to the forum recap. We're covering the top announcements, discussions, and current signal requests for the week of April 7th to 13th. And we'll begin with the top announcements, starting with Real World Finance Core Unit, who has been working closely with entities that are interested in partnering with Maker to onboard off-chain collateral. And the teams are currently reviewing 8 proposals for new collateral, which they will have to prioritize based on a combination of factors that are provided in the post. And for more details on the proposals themselves and the prioritization efforts, check out the post. And next up, we have a bug that has been discovered in the Gelato top-up contract, and the fix has already been deployed. No funds were lost or are at risk. The PE team has also made some changes to update the vest to point to the new contract and the next executive. And moving on to discussions, there's been a lot of discussions, continuing the ongoing discussion on the most effective process for onboarding new assets into Maker. This collaboration post between CES, Risk, Growth, PE, and Oracle core units they offer a set of guidelines for assessing candidates for new collaterals. And next up, we have a post that's inspired by the recommended guideline metrics for on-chain collateral. Traster Trey posted an open letter aiming to provide perspective on the impatience that some community members have mentioned concerning proposals and the process of onboarding real-world assets. And next up, We have several authors who contributed to posting a lengthy but very detailed and candid contextualization of MakerDAO's evolution of real-world assets, beginning with the early Maker 1.0 to today, and even including future opportunities and potential around real-world assets. And moving on to our signal requests that are currently active, we have 2 going on right now. First up, Urban has recently revised his MIP 40C3 to modify the strategic happiness core unit budget. And due to the original budget quarter now being complete, Andrew requests a one-time transfer of 35,000 Dai to cover the time gap between budget cycles. The funds will be used to produce and deliver swag for Amsterdam coming up and other upcoming events until the next governance cycle. The vote will run up until April 21st, and it's currently winning. And next up, we have TrueFi, who is signaling to onboard a D3M for a newly created TrueFi 3-month maturity Dai lending portfolio with a depth ceiling of 50 to 100 million Dai. Ryan is a member of TrueFi, and he states that this onboarding is in line with MakerDAO's aggressive growth strategy. He also believes that this action will promote non-crypto lending opportunities, customized loan opportunities, future collaborations. However, some downsides to this are risks in smart contracts, multi-sigs, illiquidity, and compliance. Now, the vote will run up to April 25th, and it's also winning with yes votes. And that's it for the forum recap. Check out the forum at a glance for more discussions, ongoing initiatives, and help wanted. And a quick note on the monthly core unit updates coming out soon. The publication will be out by Monday latest, just waiting to get all of the March updates in there. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Artem. Appreciate the updates. So that brings us on to initiative updates. David, are you the one running the? Oh no, it's yes, that's right. It's strategic finance. Exciting. All right, who's up for strategic finance?
That would be me. Sorry, need to
No.
find my unmute button.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, go ahead. Take away, Mark.
Next slide, please. So, hey all, this is AES from the forums, facilitator of the strategic finance core unit. Just brief legal disclaimer before we kick things off. This report is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, legal, regulatory, or tax advice. Next slide, please. So the protocol earned 6 million in revenue last month, a 15% decrease versus prior month, and a 31% decrease from prior year. Last March was an extremely bullish period, which saw ETH rates rise to a high of 5.5%. So with that in mind, a 13% decrease in net interest income becomes much more palatable with current ETH rates 60% lower today. On-chain workforce expenses increased 57% from last month, driven by the timing of the PE budget draw, which had February's budget captured in March, as well as March's budget. One of the few bright spots on this abbreviated P&L is our Oracle gas costs, which were down 45% last month due to, I think, much lower NFT trading volume and minting volume across Ethereum. Next slide, please. Here's a brief month over month and quarter over quarter walk, showing the walk from our recurring net protocol income, which just captures stability fees and our operating expenses, down to our March income. So we have a walk from February to March, showing the largest driver is the increase in workforce expenses, with a modest offset on the Oracle gas expenses. And on the quarter over quarter view, we see a much higher driver coming from the change in our assets, or risk-weighted assets, and then also a much more modest offset on the Oracle gas expense side. Next slide, please.
So on the lending business, we can see that we have an ongoing decline in dynamic vault collateral size and a loss of market share. That's mainly due to the fact that we are not in a full bull market. But as you can see, we still have a healthy share between ETH and VWAP Bitcoin, even if VWAP Bitcoin is going down significantly. Next slide, please. On the overview of the balance sheet assets, as you can see, we have a small increase in the total yield-bearing assets. You need to take into account that we have some gelato pools in that are not yielding a lot. And one is now yielding 0 basis point, but it's still counted as yield-bearing assets because it's a loan. And we have 62% that are in USDC. So the good part is that we have a lot of liquidity. So that's very good for the peg. The bad part is that we are not generating a lot of revenues from this part. Next slide, please. On the risk matrix perspective, it's not a big difference since last month. So as you can see, for the capitalization ratio, which is a surplus buffer or equity divided by the yield-bearing assets. So what is really risky if you exclude USDC? We are still at 2.3%, which is not a lot if you want, but still something very high compared to historical numbers. One reason is that we don't have a lot of crypto loan outstanding. That's the main issue. And on the leverage ratio, which is equity divided by all the assets that we have, let's say USDC, the PSM and the crypto loans, it's quite flat over the last year, more or less, just below 1%. And yes, that's around it for my part. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. So here to talk a little bit more about the market dynamics. We're going to go through an overview of the different market share trends and talk a little bit about trends on Arbitrum as well. Here, the prevailing trend in the ETH lending market is one of decline, month on month, quarter on quarter, and year on year. We're flagging the sort of last day of March because there was a significant move in market share literally on the 31st of March, with Nexo moving ETH in and out of vaults, and so creating a little bit of churn there at the end. One of the things that's worth highlighting from this slide is that in this environment of sort of depressed lending demand, Aave is nevertheless gaining a lot of share, largely driven by their liquidity mining incentives. And so, yeah, the story here is one of trying to weather the storm, look for growth where it occurs, nurture the whales, and make sure that they don't leave the vaults and stop generating revenue for the protocol. And then, yeah, hopefully wait for one day for Aave to stop pumping money and sending it to people. Next slide. So on Wrap BTC, it's an environment contrary to the one that you see in ETH, where lending demand is increasing quite nicely year on year. Aave takes the crown for growth entirely because of the last minute move, again, by Nexo, withdrawing 100% of their BTC vaults, but with the intention to reposition them back into the protocol eventually. So we're hoping to see this move back into the vaults across the month of April. But I think what this slide does is highlight the vulnerability that we face in this space and shows how competitive it is. Barriers to entry and exit are essentially zero. So this is a very competitive, rate-driven space where whales hold a lot of sway. So yeah, it'll be important to keep an eye on those in the months going forward. Next slide. There's an impressive stablecoin growth story in Arbitrum, as Arbitrum in general is sort of peeling away from the rest of the level twos in terms of total value locked. And the recent run-up that you see towards the end, starting in mid-March, is largely due to the acceleration from the launch of the Stargate bridge as of the mid of last month. But the good news is that our team, Hexo, the protocol engineering guys, they're in touch with Stargate. I won't speak for what how advanced those discussions are, but the idea would be to have Dai listed on Stargate as well, as it's as it cleared the $2 billion value locked mark and just keeps going. Yeah, and then final slide. So the final slide where I think we should spend maybe a little bit more time to make sure that the information gets properly digested. We're basically showing a 3+9 forecast for the full year 2022. We're breaking out the interest income on loan balances and the interest income generated. And we're looking at things on a quarterly basis, so actuals for 2021, 2022, and full year actuals for 2021, plus forecast for 2022. In other words, this full year 2022 figure has actuals of Q1 and the forecast for the rest of the year. The way that we've built up the assumptions is with as much conservatism as we are able to stomach. What we're looking at is basically a relatively flat ETH lending market, which would be an improvement relative to the lending market today. So we're hoping that over the course of the year, and these balances are essentially an average throughout the year, we're hoping that these balances sort of stabilize as the year moves on. But there's one major catalyst with the merge and a lot of uncertainty on what that will do to lending demand. If it accelerates lending demand in staked ETH and Maker is uncompetitive, then it might accelerate market share gains for Aave, for example. If we're able to take some of that share, it might turn the trend around and start building the vaults in ETH again. On WBTC, we're basically projecting on the back of sort of good, on assuming that Nexo returns the BTC into the vault, we're projecting sort of good growth on the back of general BTC market growth. Real world assets, we're starting from a very, very small base as the foundations were sort of built throughout the year 2021. They started in April 2021, so they don't show up in Q1 of last year. And what we're hoping is that we are able to hit an average of sort of 300 million debt ceiling of vault capacity on average throughout the year, which would imply about 600 million towards the end of the year. And then others captures basically all the other vaults that generate a little bit less yield. So what we see here is that what we're forecasting is essentially around 40 million Dai in interest income for both ETH, for each of ETH and WBTC, with another 20 from real world assets and the other vaults in the system. So here, I think this highlights again the story. You know, it's important to nurture and grow the whales. We need to be able to make much more comprehensive revenue generating bets. And in terms of expenses, it's worth highlighting that 2021 is understated because of the dissolution of the foundation sort of in the middle of the year. So some of these expenses are actually understated. So it's not like the protocol was legitimately running with only 17 million Dai last year. The expenses increase, but I think what's important is not to focus on the absolute amount, but rather think about the expenses in ROI terms and look to invest in where they're able to get the maximum amount of growth possible. This particular environment that we're in at the moment is quite sideways, quite volatile, quite challenging to work in. Expenses, particularly salary expenses, tend to have quite a fixed nature. So this operating expenses line is essentially a sort of fixed liability because the whole protocol is priced in Dai terms, and then the rest of the revenue items they're floating relative to Dai, so there's a strong sort of exchange rate effect there. But as we think about putting these expenses together, again, important to think of them in ROI terms and to transparently communicate how those expenses are performing to Maker holders to hopefully avoid a lot of the fiery back and forth that we've had in some of the budget expansion requests. And then finally, one thing that's worth flagging, we're not showing here a balance sheet picture. Currently, our balance sheet is yielding very little. And this is essentially a huge opportunity cost that we're incurring as a protocol. And it would improve the resilience of the protocol and the overall profitability to increase the asset productivity by putting the balance sheet of stablecoins to work, by putting our treasury to work. These revenues are diversified and they act as volatility cushions when the markets go up and down. And investing in real world short-term bonds also has the added benefit of being less correlated to the overall crypto market, so providing a stable source of revenue on top. I think I've ranted enough. I think it'd be nice to hear from people if they have any questions or if anything isn't clear. Was I on mute the whole time? No.
No, you're fine.
Okay, okay, all right. Just no reaction, right?
I'd like to think someone would have told you. It's like
Yeah.
20 minutes and you're muted. Yeah, no, I appreciate the presentation. Yeah, I guess maybe for me, sort of less familiar with sort of sort of financial forecasts and this sort of thing. Like, is there sort of like a bottom line like thing we should take away from this? I guess.
Yeah, we tried to. So again, these are forecasts for the end of the year, right? One of the things that we'd like to highlight is that who knows. So ETH balances, we're basically projecting them to be flat on average, flat relative to the end of March of this year. And this would be a gain relative to the trend, given that the lending market is compressing, but we don't know what the lending market will do in the coming months. So yeah, all of these figures are I think the key takeaway is just to focus on driving as much growth as we can with every expense that we make, and focus less on the absolute amount of the expenses and more on the productivity. Yeah, ROI. Exactly. Sorry, I got Discord pings distracting me. Making more revenue generating bets is very important. I think related to this asset productivity question, we need to have more conviction and make more revenue generating bets with the expenses that we're incurring in order to improve the long-term potential of some of these bets to become a real source of growth. And I think related to this, if you look at the real world assets picture, I mean, we're operating in a sort of in a credit deficit environment. The rates are low. With more competition, they get even lower. So here it's important to get these values as large as possible and as large as we can. The benefit of the real world asset space is that it's uncorrelated from crypto. And I think this is a big advantage of this asset class. Fresh krill would help. I don't have the real answer for how you nurture the whales. I mean, rates are going to be a big feature of keeping them attracted to or linked to a protocol. But the reality is that it's very easy for whales to switch from one to the other. Marketing CU might help increasing demand for Dai. And I think in this regard, that Maker has a key advantage relative to some of its lending peers, notably Aave and Compound, in that we have a stablecoin that has or should have organic demand around it. The more demand there is for Dai and the more activity there is around Dai, the more interesting it will be for people to collateralize their crypto loans to create Dai.
Yeah, I'll just add that we are doing a lot of research as a team into the segmentation of our customers versus Aave and Compound, and looking at the different markets for those customers. And then further digging on-chain to research and analyze what those people are using Dai and other stablecoins for, so we can better position the vault as a product. So we're talking to growth a lot about these research activities, and hopefully we'll have more to share in the coming months.
All right. Yeah, Kang, go your hand up. Do you have a question?
Oh yeah, just in terms of the whales, just wondering how much kind of behind the scenes do we know who the individuals are, and we kind of directly communicate with them, able to directly market to them, and are we someone somewhere in our open community, are we doing that? It's an advantage, obviously, to have those personal relationships, and I'm just curious about the landscape there.
We have a personal relationship with the whales, as said, like the biggest whales are Nexon, Celsius. We have like a personal relationship with them. We are in like constant communications with them. We receive feedback with them. Like thanks to them, we thought about the creation of the institutional vaults. And yes, as someone mentioned in the chat, like in the end, like what they care about the most is about rates, predictability. and capital efficiency. So that's what they are looking for. And with the institutional vaults, we are trying to like give them a product that will solve that. We are also in conversations with not whales, but like the largest users of the protocol. The ones that have the largest vaults, sorry, but not of the size of the whales. And well, some of them, I think you all know, one of them is Gnosis, who has like a huge vault with a stake it. And of course, when we talk with DAOs that want to, that have vaults within Maker, and if we want to like do something else with them so they can like increase their position, we have also to give them something in return. So that is why we are considering that maybe we could think about onboarding their token as collateral, but in return, they have to mint at least X amount of Dai and keep it for 1 year, or I don't know how for how long. So we are like trying to do these kind of things, but you're absolutely right. Like the thing with these whales is that they need a one-to-one support. So yeah.
All right, thanks for that. That's the question and the answer. Are we ready to move on? Does anyone have any other questions about finances?
Yeah, actually, hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Cool. This is Frank, 3F delegate. Just for the strategic core unit. When thinking in bets, and you're looking to obviously take on more risk when you have the ability to do so, right? And there is possibility to take on some more risk right now. So when thinking in bets, should the core units be hiring more? And the reason why I asked that is because, you know, I'm seeing a lot of other side chains or layer ones deploying all these platforms, and most of the time they're doing liquidity mining with USDC, USDT, and it's kind of frustrating. I mean, I get it, right? Like you don't want non-canonical Dai to just go all over the place because then it gets messy. So I was just wondering, when thinking in bets, how do you guys feel about core units hiring more folks so we can kind of keep up with all of these platforms that are raising, you know, $250 million in 48 hours, which is bananas, but yeah.
I guess for hiring, I think it kind of goes back to the ROI and what value is being created by the core unit or the expansion of a core unit. Like what problem are they solving? Are they bringing on new revenue? Are they just, you know, a cost side, but making things more efficient operationally, which could indirectly lead to more revenue? I think it's hard to make a, you know, blanket statement one way or the other, but there's, but for one thing, for me, I think, you know, on the product side, the more we expand and do R&D and products, I think the higher revenue we'll be able to generate in making some of these, you know, revenue bets. So I would hate to underinvest in engineering, for example, especially when we have all these D3Ms, you know, MCD on level 2s and other chains in the pipeline, which can really drive a lot of organic Dai and revenue growth with the new vaults.
To that end, I think there was a comment earlier in the chat from Luke asking whether it was cash or accrued type of expenses. I think one of the disadvantages of the transparency of the blockchain space is that all of these expenses will sort of hit early and the benefits are felt later. So you know, when you make an investment in technology, for example, in a regular company, you might find ways to smooth it over by capitalizing it onto the balance sheet. We can't really do this in blockchain. So yeah, worth keeping in mind when discussing. Yeah, so to Paper Imperium's point, most of this is basically cash, right? It's very difficult to make it grow, near impossible. And so this is worth bearing in mind when we think about budget requests. And yeah, the final message is to just think about the volatility of this market, which might turn, and just making sure that we're positioned well to take advantage of the upturns. And for clarification, in case I misspoke and said that the Nexo BTC went to Aave, I think I was referring to a generalized example of whales going to Aave, not that specifically Nexo went to Aave.
That seems like maybe a good place to move on. Coming to about that time. So yeah, I appreciate the presentation, strategic finance. That was awesome. Always good to find out where we're at. David, do you want to give us on presentation wise? All right, next I think we have Akiva, who's going to sort of talk a little bit about MIP 66 and the Pairwyse Licensure stuff briefly, I think.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the MIP. We've submitted MIP 66. One of the key aspects of MIP 66 is joint business development to promote fixed rate Dai. We believe that fixed rate Dai is essential to the development of MakerDAO, not only on the vault side, not only fixed rate vaults, but also fixed rate Dai. And we believe that that's the case because all financial institutions need to match their assets and their liabilities. MakerDAO is no different. And part of matching your assets and liabilities is matching floating to floating and fixed to fixed. So what we see is that, just like Maker right now has a lot of floating assets and floating liabilities, it will also need to have fixed assets and fixed liabilities. And part of doing that is using interest rate derivatives. And that's why we developed a product for MakerDAO over the past couple of years, which will allow for fixed interest rates without interfering with any of the core Maker code, rather just, in the same way people use money Legos and abstract over different protocols, we can abstract over MakerDAO in the same way with these money Legos and create fixed rates. We believe that this is beneficial, not just from the perspective of assets and liabilities, but it's also beneficial from the perspective of decentralization. It's important to have composable instruments and not tie everything together into the same code base. We believe it's important to also have fixed rate protocols which abstract over MakerDAO rather than going into the core plumbing. And that's why we developed this product. To go further, I would say that one of the key parts of developing a fixed rate ecosystem around Maker, and we're ready to go and start doing this right away as soon as the MIP passes, is business development. And that's why we partnered with two regulated investment banks. One is First Penny Investments in Australia, and the other one is True Altitude in the UK. And using those partnerships, we believe we can grow MakerDAO's pipeline of fixed rate investors, largely in those jurisdictions, UK and Australia, but also in other places across the world, because those companies also have a presence in UAE and also in Switzerland. So we believe that in order for Maker to achieve maximum stability and decentralization, it's important to have multiple fixed rate ecosystems, not just one, to have multiple. We also believe that in order to get there, we need strong business development, strong decentralization, and that's why we propose also that if the MIP passes, we'll also open up our patents to the community, which two of them have been granted, and we're willing to open those up to the community if the MIP passes. And we want to create an open fixed rate ecosystem of Maker so we can see DeFi thrive. And I'll leave it at that if you guys have any questions.
Appreciate the priority, Akiva. Yeah, does anyone have any questions before we move on?
Okay, I guess that's it.
Yep, seems like we're good. Great. That brings us to our discussion segment. David, would you like to introduce the topic today? Or?
Honestly, I think a better person to introduce the topic would probably, I don't want to throw anybody like under the bus, so to speak, but I think Sam has a pretty good grasp on this whole thing. So yeah, if somebody with more knowledge on this topic wants to introduce it, I'm happy to give it over.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess this is about the recent news of the 4 pool trying to replace the 3 pool on Curve. So you know, people who read crypto Twitter are probably aware of this. Sort of, I guess this topic is about what we want our response to be, if any. Sort of thinking about what the ramifications are of potentially losing the 3 pool and possible solutions. Yeah, so I didn't have anything prepared.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's a good intro. Yeah, does anybody have any comments or thoughts on this?
Yes, so there's a couple things here, right? So I don't think that, personally think that 3 pool is gonna really survive, right? It'll be something between a 4 pool and a 2 pool. Question is, you know, how much does it affect us in the short term, and how much does it affect us in the long term? Can we do something about that, and should we, right? You know, in terms of, right, the peg, right, we don't struggle with that in the slightest, right? We have enormous gobs of liquidity in the PSM that are, you know, over 3x the amount of liquidity that's currently in 3 pool, right? 4 pool, right, we would never have wanted to really join anyway, right? Because basically it's UST rug risk, right? So the way it works with a curve pool is you are the it's essentially whatever is the weakest link in the pool in terms of all the tokens in that pool. That's what you basically have almost full exposure to, right? And in terms of 2 pool, right? I mean, there's not much that we can do about that, right? And yeah, Sebastian, I see what you mean by Dai plus 4 pool, but the problem is nobody wants to incentivize that, right? The way it works right on Curve is that the projects that want to incentivize liquidity, right, for their token, right, they acquire Curve or they bribe Curve voters in some way, right? And so without those bribes or without those votes, you would never get the Dai pool to have enough yield, right, for any amount of liquidity to build up in that. So then the question kind of is, well, should Maker try to get a stake in Curve voting? And I would say no. It's one, it's really expensive, and 2, it's one of those things where the people that got in early really got like the best kind of chess position here, and we would never build up a significant enough stake to really swing our ding dong around. And we then you can kind of look at it and say, well, okay, how likely is Curve to be the you know, the DEX, right, of tomorrow, of 3 years from now, of 5 years from now? And I think that's, you know, quite questionable, right? I think we've seen a lot of like jockeying between DEXs, right, or even DEX aggregators, right, over the years, and there's nothing that tells me that you know, Curve is going to be the central hub of liquidity, you know, for forevermore from now on, right? We've through G-Uni, right, through the increasing debt ceilings, and through the amount of leverage that we allow, right, we've already started building up significant sums of liquidity in Uniswap v3, right, and that's just going to continue. So really, like, you know, are users not going, you know, from a peg point of view, it's completely irrelevant. From a liquidity point of view, you know, we're already building up liquidity on Uniswap. The only thing you could argue is from a user point of view, you know, will they not be exposed to Dai because Dai is not in the Curve 4 pool or in the Curve 2 pool? I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what the value of something like that is, but personally, like looking at all the information, I don't think we really have to do anything. Like I think Terra is really trying to hype this up into being something bigger than it really is, and I think it's good for them, but it really doesn't matter to us that much.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the
Sorry,
way
that was a lot of talking, so I'm going to stop.
Yeah. So the way I view this is less of like an actual issue for the protocol, more of like a marketing PR problem kind of. And, you know, I don't think it looks great to do nothing. So if we could do sort of a easy response, I think that could potentially work. So one idea that's been thrown around is they have 4 pool, we can make 5 pool with like BUSD, USDC, USDP, and a couple others that I'm not thinking off the top of my head. So yeah, this could kind of be a narrative shift in our favor. We wouldn't really have to spend anything. We would just redirect some of the PSM supply into this 5 pool and give high leverage on it so that the fees, it'll fill up even with low fees. And we don't need to worry too much about like rewards and stuff like that. So this is a potential option.
I don't think that could work, Sam.
Why is that?
The Curve fees are just completely irrelevant. Like the Curve liquidity is almost 100% dependent on the incentives cannon kind of being pointed at a pool.
Yeah, I mean, the fees could be essentially nothing, and we just like, we can set the leverage as high as we want, because like it's the same as the PSM. Like we could set it to like even 1000x, like it'll fill up, right? We can fill it to whatever number we want as long as we have PSM supply.
Okay.
There's an additional benefit here too that you know, Curve have kind of become less friendly with us, and this may be sort of a nod to them that, you know, we want to continue working together. Like ultimately, this is just for marketing PR reasons and stuff like that. But I think it could be a good move. Doesn't require much engineering effort and could just be an easy win in my view.
I mean, okay, from an asset risk exposure point of view, it would almost be, right, you're only as strong as the weakest asset, right? So if any single one of those gets rugged, you get rugged for the entire exposure you have to that pool. So it would, I think it would be better to even just have if you're willing to take on risk exposure to each of those coins, then just create a PSM for each of those. And then you kind of segment out the risk, right? And if any one of those fails, you only lose that particular segment instead of the entire thing. Plus it sets us up like positionally better if we just have like this entire network of PSMs, right? Eventually it just kind of evolves into its own Curve competitor, at least from a stablecoin point of view.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Nadia.
Yeah, that I really like Sam's idea from like a narrative perspective, because like everyone is complaining that we are like doing nothing against Terra and all of that, and I think that's good, because I don't think that Maker is a Terra's competitor, because I think we are more than just a stable coin. But it will be great, like a response to the crypto community, to the DeFi community, to like maybe to think about what we can do with the rarity pools probably, but what we can do with other like stable coins like Fei, like like the ones that didn't join to this like Curve 4 pool. I think for like that is from a narrative perspective, I like the idea. And also if we could like use the Curve LP token with like the 4 pool plus Dai or 3 pool plus whatever, or create a new pool and use it for leverage and give them a 0 stability fee, like that will also, just for narrative purposes, that will like, I don't know, like that will like create a message around what are the things that Maker is doing. And I think that is really important that we start doing things not just for like our community, but also for like the external crypto community. Like we need to like start like being more like less risk averse.
Yes, more proactive, and also be the leader of that movement.
I completely disagree with
Nick, sorry, can we
everything I
come to
just
you in a
heard,
s-
but I love and respect you guys.
Okay, we'll come to you in a second, Nick. Seb, do you have a comment? Feel free to raise your hands if you kind of want preference.
Yeah, sure. So I have a comment is that I think we are missing the point. So we might lose 1.5 billion of DAI demand if the 3 pool disappear and DAI is not kept. And it's not a big problem for us. But the problem is that it's not a big problem for us because we are not doing nothing with those 1.5 billion. They are just sitting as USDC in the PSM. So they would just disappear. And it's not a big deal because we are doing nothing. But the problem is that we are not using the PSM. And I understand that we can use all this liquidity to provide leverage to initiate some, like we are doing for the Gelato Dai USDC pairs. And it's providing liquidity. We can do a lot of stuff, but that's kind of useless at the end of the day because it's not generating anything. And if you want to be useful, we should use all the assets we have on the balance sheets and get revenues and give those revenues to the DAI holders. And then we can fight because the stablecoin wars, the next step is more about giving a yield to customers. And we have no idea how to do that currently.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't just like totally dismiss losing demand because I think we should like sort of plan for growing the interest-bearing DAI supply to meet the demand. So like that should be sort of our outlook. We shouldn't just be like, we should fight somewhat to keep this demand, even though, yes, it's just sitting in the PSM for now.
I mean, the PSM is just dormant capital right now, right? Presumably in the future, we will find a way to earn yield off of that, right? So, you know, being able to keep up, you know, a healthy amount of capital in the PSM, you know, is objectively very good.
Yep. Yeah, I think this could be potentially a very simple message that the crypto media will pick up, you know, make a response to 4 pool with 5 pool. It's like, it's kind of simple and dumb, but I think it's like people just get it.
No, well, here's where I disagree, right? Now you just compare 4 pool and 5 pool, and 5 pool will look like a fucking joke compared to 4 pool. And now we like, the narrative looks even worse because now we tried to compete, right? And we, you know, by the numbers, right, we lost.
Why would it be a joke? We can crank the TVL up to whatever we want, basically, as long as there's PSM room.
Yeah, but nobody will use it, right? It'll just be us using it. The yield will be nothing, right? And it'll just be like this dead pool that's not used by anyone. Like
that's kind of the case with the other pools. If you
were to go look at the LPs, it would just be one LP and it would just be Maker.
And if you listen to Sam, he was on Bankless this week. He's saying that Curve is not a DEX. And his view, I think, is right because no one is using Curve for anything. It's just a way to reward the LPs. And so you are incentivize the usage of your token by bribing. I am not an expert of CRV and stuff like that, but you are just giving a reward on the token. And that's it. So it's more a saving account than anything else.
Yeah, just to clarify, Sebastian, which Sam was that?
Yeah, Sam is from Frax, the founder of Frax.
Gotcha.
And he was calling MakerDAO as he wanted to create a PSM with us at some point, and we didn't move really on this point. because Frax is another kind of model, so it doesn't fit well, I think, with us.
Yeah, I just want to caution against starting to do really risky things because we feel like we're not being degen enough for some kind of narrative. You know, we've never been the degen protocol. We've been the risk averse protocol, and that's gotten us to what we are today. And it's good to at least like have that, you know, property, right, that we can kind of hoist up than to start trying to do degen stuff and still not be as degen as other protocols. And, you know, obviously they get more growth out of it, but now we are neither, you know, low risk nor high growth, right? And we're in this murky middle where I don't think strategically we really want to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, to me, this is not risky at all. It's like whether the stable coins are sitting in the PSM or in Curve, it's just a matter of like they're paying Curve fees. That's really the only difference, right? Like it's not any more risky to hold this stuff in the PSM or in Curve.
Well, you still have this, you know, homogeneous exposure to all of the tokens in that pool, right? Versus having them individually in a PSM.
I think it's the same risk profile.
I mean, you do, but they're all centralized, right?
Yeah.
And more or less the same way.
We already talked about earlier how we will find a way to monetize the PSM. So having that liquidity in a PSM versus having that liquidity in Curve, I know where I'd rather have the liquidity because one day we can monetize it.
I see Mark's was.
Anyways, okay, everyone knows my opinion by now, so I'm gonna let it be.
Mark, you have some comments?
Just briefly to put some numbers on this. So, you know, Curve had 27.6 million in volume traded through it in the 3 pool, and the Uniswap V3 pool had 26 million Dai USDC pair. So it's got, you know, less than 10% of the TVL, but it's doing effectively the same trading volume. So I'm not overly worried about Curve 3 pool, you know, decreasing significantly, that impacting our peg. That's it.
I just want to add, like, because what I'm worried about, not the 4th pool, but more for the 2 pool, because Curve is thinking about excluding Dai in the future deployments of this pool, which I think it's a risk for us, because if we see what happened in Arbitrum, where the 3 pool doesn't exist, we are struggling with Dai liquidity on Arbitrum, and it will be like maybe we can solve that by deploying maker bolts everywhere. Yes, but like I don't know. I don't think we can do that now, but Curve can deploy the 2 pool like tomorrow if they want. So I just want like we all to be aware of that and the risk that we have about not having Dai included in the 3 pool in the next multi-chain, like in the next deployments of Curve in their multi-chain strategy, because I think that could be a problem with Dai liquidity, not on mainnet, but on layer 2s and side chains.
Yep, and I would like to maybe let's try to avoid this defeatist attitude that we're bad at marketing, so let's not even try. Like we got to try. We got to work on things that we're not good at, instead of just, you know, we're not good at it, we're not very good at it, so we're not even going to try. Like I don't want to do that.
Anyone else have any comments? I guess we can talk about sort of liquidity more generally, potentially. Like, I guess if we don't have the curve pools on the layer 2s and other chains, like what other ways can we ensure like Dai liquidity, I guess, on those chains?
There's also the thing that we should send a message to the community in general, right? I mean, the DeFi community, that we are up for collaboration and that we lead this type of initiative too, right? Part of being the boomer coin or whatever is the name is that we don't do anything. We don't react. We don't do like nothing. We just mint Dai and that's it, right? And I believe that we have a chance to start changing this and be a bit more proactive, although I know it's a risky move, but also it can give us like a very nice image for the DeFi community.
Yeah, I agree. I think our public perception is that of we don't care and we snub other protocols and stuff like that. So it'd be nice to try and change that.
And if you think about, we had like plenty of levers to touch to model the risk of the things that we are doing. Let's use them. I mean, we should use those levers, right? And try to do new things. And I mean, when I say try, it's like doing with a purpose, right? Not just for the sake of doing it. We just need to do this right.
So I have a suggestion about making things with other protocols. There was Faye on our forum asking for PSM. So I'm not sure having a PSM with them directly is a smart move, but we might want to open them a vault so they over collateralize Dai, they are borrowing Dai, and we can get rewards for that. They are agreed to pay. They say that's in the forum. So we can get an over collateralized Dai loan to Faye with an interest rate, which is just better than the PSM. And no one replied on that. And maybe we can move on that front. Make
So
collaboration with Tribe.
What is the use case there for a borrower? Is it does Dai have significantly better yield opportunities than Faye?
No, it's not about that. So Faye is in the institution that they have a lot of equity, so they have a big surplus buffer of 300-400 million, but they have a little Faye demand currently. But they are very good and they implement as investing those assets better than us because they move faster and take a bit more risk. And so they have more liquidity issues. Is that they are always needing sometimes. Currently, they have only 20 million Dai for their PSM, so they have a PSM with us. So if we give them 100 million, they will be able to invest them in whatever ways they want. And it will still be safe for us because they have so much equity.
So yeah, make amends, go send up.
I guess I try to stay out of these things. I was just going to say, just be careful about reacting. You know, having the idea you have to react fast, it's only if you need to react, right? And so do something stronger and think about it, right? I haven't looked at this particular issue, but I think it's indicative of a larger issue, which is related to maker competitiveness that we're not addressing. And so we're kind of getting trapped in our own issues and we need to find a way to move forward on them. And so, but figure out first, is this really a real issue that we need to deal with? Is it the real issue? Or can we make a stronger move that actually silences this and does something that's bigger, that's more important for us? You know, don't let your opponent dictate what you're going to do. Do what you're going to do and let your opponent react. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we could do both. This, like, the main reason I'm suggesting this is just because it's like not a lot of effort to do this. And we have some side benefits that come from it as well, improving the relationship with Curve and such.
I'm just going to comment on the Curve thing. So I think it's entirely unclear to me, given this move, whether somehow we can get on Curve's good side. So I think there's some difficult waters here to navigate in both a political and financial sense. And when I first thought about it, I was like, hell, let's just do a deal with Balancer and have them do like a 3 pool with really low fees. I mean, let's just take it off Curve, move over, right? I don't know. I mean, like I said, I haven't looked at this particular issue, but perhaps some creative thinking here is more important than making a fast and quick, easy reaction that may not be as strong as you think.
Yeah, I mean, I believe they'll like it because they're getting more fees, right? They have another pool. The fees are going through there as opposed to the PSM.
Guys, you're missing the point. It's not liquidity swap fees are irrelevant. It is just the token emissions. That's it.
Yeah, and let me add here, this is something I've been harping on for a while. When you're trying to compete with this kind of farming liquidity that they're throwing out, you look at their numbers. I don't think it's sustainable. I look at across the board, not sustainable. But Maker hasn't even tried to enter the game in a sustainable way. It's one of the reasons why I finally threw out Maker 3.0 was I was like, let's get into this game and let's do it sustainably. And then let's have a real message that's to send about what we're going to do with Dai. But that's just my opinion. And I go wherever the DAO goes as much as I can. So it's a greater strategy we're trying to solve here. And I don't know that we do deal with this one issue with one move. And I honestly don't know that we're going to make Curve happy with us somehow.
So I guess we can maybe think about wrapping up this discussion. Unless anyone has any sort of final comments or points to make on it. Great, yeah, I think we had some sort of solid points on various sides. So that's, yeah, hopefully has been a good discussion for everyone.
I would like to add something that we didn't discuss, and like I was joking about adding the 4th pool as collateral, but it was a joke, of course. But what if we are more flexible with USDT? I know the community doesn't like that idea, but if we onboard as collateral the 3 pools, that will be like an interesting move. But of course, we have to accept USDT in our system. So something to think about.
Yeah, it's not the same as full exposure to USDT either. So like we could kind of, we wouldn't offer crazy leverage on that one maybe, so we can sustain a bit of a hit and potentially even hook it into rewards. Not saying this is necessarily a good use of time, but just sort of spitballing here.
Yeah, I think that's what I echo Monet's point. Like 3 pool is equivalent to USDT exposure. Like in all these pools, it's good as the weakest component. Like if one component fails, then the pool empties and it's just all of that component.
Oh yeah, you're right. Never mind.
Like also to put it into perspective, like the swap fees on like as a percentage on 3 pool, it's 0.15%. Right. So there's no like even trying to lever that up, the yield is nothing. Even if we do 0 like stability fees on it.
Well, I mean, you can always find a number, right? Because we can go as high leverage as we need to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's 0.15% right now. If you allow people to get leverage and just put liquidity in there, first of all, they're not going to do it because the yield will be shit. And even after you start putting liquidity in there, the yield just gets more shit, right?
Yeah, but 0.15 at like 100x leverage, that's 15%. It's not nothing.
You won't get 15%. You'll get like, I don't know, 2 or 3%, because after adding, you've just diluted the pool by that much.
Well, then you turn it up to 1,000. Like there is a number you can hit.
I mean, Nick, you're also comparing like the current API are on like 3 pool, which already has like 3 billion of liquidity in it, right? So it's 0.15 on 3 billion. So if we have a new pool with like nothing in it, then it's potentially way more than that.
Yeah, Monet's right too. The unlevered people would leave.
Yeah, and also right now, right, we are like the volume that's going through that pool. We don't know how, like, or maybe Real World Finance does, but I don't know how much of that pool's volume is actually tokens going, from Dai or to Dai, right? Like there's no to pool right now. So right now, all of the trading that's going from USDC to USDT or USDT to USDC, Dai is like getting the free ride, right? In terms of the LPs of 3 pool, like, who are putting in Dai, right? Just get to intercept the trading fees, right? From USDC to USDT and vice versa, right? So if, the liquidity starts to disappear, right? And starts going towards 4 pool, right? That, 15 BIP kind of reward APY, right, is could potentially even go lower, right? Because all of a sudden, like, we have to survive off of the yield of just Dai trading and not and we don't get to leech off of the USDC to USDT portion of the trades, right, which will exclusively be happening inside 4 pool if this whole scheme kind of comes to pass. Like it's right, it's all interconnected.
That part is cheaper for sure. Like if we exclude Tether, we lose potentially a bunch of volume, right?
Like I'm not trying to sound like defeatist here and shoot down everything. I'm just kind of more in line with what Makerman was saying, and that this is not really worth our time to respond to. It's kind of a foregone conclusion, and we should just focus on the things that we're actually good at, right? And are targeting, and that will make a difference for us, and more than just some narrative stuff, which even if we go in this direction, we're still not guaranteed to actually achieve. Like it's more deterministic.
So I don't think anyone's mentioned this yet, but like one of the potential benefits I see is that it gives like other tokens on Curve like another option to pair against, right? So the kind of problem, well, not the problem, but potentially one of the problems with the current options is that all of them are slightly not good for various reasons, right? Like 3 pool has Tether, like 2 pool if it comes in will have Tether, like 4 pool if it comes in has Tether and Frax and UST. Like if we offered a pool which is like Dai against like centralized stables that do all have some level of trust, right? Like USDC, Pax, GUSD, etc. Then that is an option for other people to pair against. That doesn't, in theory, have, doesn't require exposure to Tether, doesn't require exposure to Frax and to USD. Like that doesn't kind of exist currently. Don't know if that's something people would value, but like, I don't know.
Oh, that's a fair point.
All right, this discussion has gone on a fair bit, so maybe we should move on. It's getting a little late, so start thinking about wrapping up. Maybe David, if we can move on to this sort of general discussion slide. Is there anything unrelated anyone wants to talk about briefly before we wrap up for today? Yeah, I'm going to go with no. Maybe that was the discussion, as you're saying, Nick. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, it's like 20 past, so I'm happy to wrap up here. We can get back to our stuff 10 minutes early. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. And yeah, we'll see you all next week, if not before. Thanks, guys.